Scientists once believed this was a monster reptile, long, serpentine, built to kill. They named it king lizard. They were wrong. This creature was not a reptile. It was not a dinosaur. It was one of the earliest whales ever discovered, and it hunted like nothing alive today. In 1834, a massive vertebra surfaced in Louisiana. Long, alien, unmistakably monstrous. Richard Harlan, an American anatomist, believed it belonged to a marine reptile and named it Basilosaurus. Years later, jaws and teeth reached England, sent to Richard Owen, an English biologist, anatomist, and paleontologist. One detail changed everything. What finally gave Basilosaurus away were its double-rooted teeth. Reptiles don't have them. Mammals do. Each tooth was anchored by two deep roots, an evolutionary adaptation built to withstand intense chewing stress. In Basilosaurus, that meant its bite could absorb enormous force, and it meant something even more shocking. This so-called king lizard wasn't a reptile at all. It was a mammal, like us. After this discovery, Richard Owen tried to correct the mistake. He proposed a new name, Zeuglodon cetoides, yoked tooth whale, a name meant to reflect its true identity and its connection to modern whales. But the original name had already taken hold, and so the misnomer survived. Basilosaurus, the king lizard. That was never a lizard at all. The name stuck. The mystery grew. Basilosaurus ruled the oceans during the late Eocene between 40 and 34 million years ago. This was not the ocean we know today. Earth was warmer. There were no polar ice caps. Sea levels were far higher, flooding vast portions of the continents. What are now deserts, forests, and coastlines were once shallow tropical seas. Along the southeastern United States, warm waters covered Alabama and Mississippi, forming rich marine habitats filled with fish, sharks, early whales, and sea cows. Half a world away, in Egypt's Valley of the Whales, hundreds of fossils mark an ancient shoreline where Basilosaurus and its relatives lived. The widespread distribution of these fossils tells us Basilosaurus was not rare. It was successful, perfectly adapted to an ocean built for predators. Vast continental shelves stretched for hundreds of miles, creating endless hunting grounds just below the surface. These were not deep, silent oceans, but warm, living seas where sunlight reached the bottom and prey gathered in enormous numbers. Every shoreline was fluid. In this world, size mattered, speed mattered, endurance mattered, and Basilosaurus had all three. Shallow seas brought prey directly into its range, season after season, generation after generation. For millions of years, this ancient marine world held steady, and for millions of years, Basilosaurus remained at the top of it. Basilosaurus could reach up to 65 feet in length, yet its body looked nothing like the whales we know today. It was long, narrow, and serpentine, more eel than whale. Its proportions were strange, even by prehistoric standards. A short rib cage packed near the front, followed by an elongated torso that stretched on and on, giving it an almost unnatural silhouette in the water. Where modern whales appear compact and powerful, Basilosaurus looked stretched, like a living sea serpent. Its spine tells the real story. Unlike modern whales, whose vertebrae are dense and built to withstand the crushing pressure of deep dives, Basilosaurus had hollow vertebrae that were likely fluid-filled. This lightweight construction made deep diving impossible. Too much pressure would have collapsed its backbone. Instead, Basilosaurus lived near the surface, cruising warm, sunlit waters where pressure was low and prey was abundant. Movement came not from speed, but from control. Basilosaurus swam by, undulating its entire body in slow, wave-like motions, rippling from head to tail. It did not sprint like a dolphin or burst forward like a modern predator. It glided. This serpentine swimming style allowed it to maneuver silently through shallow seas, conserving energy while stalking prey. It was a patient hunter in an ocean that rewarded ambush over pursuit. Its front flippers still carried echoes of land. Each retained functional elbow joints, a feature lost in later whales. These limbs were not just paddles, but articulated remnants of arms that once bore weight on land. And behind them, almost hidden against its massive body, were hind legs, tiny, fully jointed, completely detached from the spine. They were useless for walking, incapable of propulsion, and yet unmistakably real. These legs were evolutionary ghosts, likely used only during mating, a reminder that Basilosaurus had not fully left the land behind. This was not a modern whale. It was something in between, an apex predator shaped by transition. Basilosaurus ruled the oceans not as a perfected marine mammal, but as a powerful experiment in evolution, caught between two worlds, carrying the anatomy of its terrestrial past into a future that belonged entirely to the sea. Despite its massive size, Basilosaurus had a small brain by modern whale standards. There was no enlarged brain, no complex sound-focusing organ, no echolocation. The ocean around it was not alive with clicks or songs the way it is today. That tells us something important. Basilosaurus wasn't finding prey by sound. It didn't scan the darkness. It waited. It watched. The seas it lived in were warm and relatively shallow, with sunlight reaching far below the surface. In those conditions, vision mattered more than sound. Movement could be seen. Shapes stood out. A shadow passing above or below you could mean the difference between survival and being eaten. There's also no evidence that Basilosaurus lived in groups. No signs of pods. No coordinated hunting behavior. No social structure like we see in modern whales or dolphins. Everything we know points to a solitary animal. This means Basilosaurus likely hunted alone. It didn't sing. It didn't call to others. It didn't rely on communication to bring down prey. If it made sounds at all, they were probably limited, close range, and purely functional. This was not a social animal moving through the ocean as part of a community. And that wasn't a disadvantage. During the late Eocene, the oceans were crowded with life, but thin on competition at the top. There were sharks, crocodiles, and other ancient whales, but few animals that could challenge something this large head-on. Dominance didn't require coordination. It didn't require planning. It required presence. A 60-foot predator appearing out of the water column didn't need to outthink its prey. It just needed to reach it. This is likely why Basilosaurus stayed near the surface. Without echolocation, deeper waters would have been a risk. Darkness removes the advantage of size. Near the surface, light did the work. Silhouettes were visible. Timing was everything. Modern whales evolved in a very different ocean. One shaped by colder waters, deeper dives, faster prey, and intense competition. Intelligence, communication, and social cooperation became survival tools. Basilosaurus lived before all of that. It belonged to a brief moment in evolutionary history when being enormous was enough, when the ocean rewarded size more than cleverness, when a predator didn't need to signal, coordinate, or chase. It just needed to arrive. Basilosaurus wasn't a thinker. It wasn't a strategist. It was a solitary hunter in a warm, forgiving ocean, quiet, patient, and already at the top. Everything about Basilosaurus points to one unavoidable conclusion. This was the apex predator of its world. Its jaws were not built for filter feeding, nor for delicate work. They were lined with long, blade-shaped teeth, designed for one purpose: killing. Each tooth could slice, puncture, and crush, locking into flesh and bone with terrifying efficiency. Scientists estimate its bite force at over 3,600 pounds per square inch. That is pressure capable of fracturing bone, snapping vertebrae, and ending a struggle almost instantly. And this is not speculation. The fossil record preserves the evidence. In Egypt, paleontologists discovered the remains of juvenile Dorodon whales inside what was once the body cavity of a Basilosaurus. These were not scattered fragments, washed together by chance. They were prey. Nearby, Dorodon skulls tell the rest of the story. Deep puncture marks line up perfectly with Basilosaurus teeth, often concentrated around the head and neck. These were targeted attacks, killing bites. Precision strikes meant to disable fast, struggling prey before it could escape. Scavengers tear at whatever they find. Predators choose where to strike. Basilosaurus chose the kill. It did not limit itself to small animals. Its diet included sharks, massive fish, turtles armored in thick shells, sea cows grazing the seafloor, and other early whales. In an ecosystem already filled with large predators, Basilosaurus did not compete with sharks for dominance. It surpassed them. It occupied a higher rung entirely. This was not a hunter that chased relentlessly. Its body was not built for speed. Instead, it relied on scale, surprise, and overwhelming violence. When Basilosaurus committed to an attack, there was little its victim could do to escape. In the warm Eocene seas, size was safety, and Basilosaurus was larger, heavier, and deadlier than almost anything else alive. For millions of years, there was no creature that challenged it, not because they weren't dangerous, but because nothing else could. Basilosaurus did not fall to a stronger predator. It fell to a changing planet. As the Eocene drew to a close, Earth began to cool. Global temperatures dropped. Ice started forming at the poles for the first time in tens of millions of years. Ocean currents shifted, reorganizing how heat moved around the planet. The warm, shallow seas that once stretched across continents began to shrink, break apart, and vanish. For Basilosaurus, this was catastrophic. Its entire way of life depended on those seas. It was built for warm surface waters, not frigid depths. Its hollow vertebrae could not withstand the pressure of deep diving. Its hunting strategy relied on visibility and proximity in sunlit oceans, not long-distance travel through cold, open water. As shorelines retreated and ecosystems collapsed, the world that made Basilosaurus dominant simply ceased to exist, and evolution does not pause for legends. While Basilosaurus faded, something new was rising. Early ancestors of modern whales began to change. They grew more compact. Their bones became denser and stronger. Their bodies evolved for efficiency rather than brute force. These new whales could dive deep, travel long distances, and follow shifting food sources across entire oceans. They developed larger brains, more complex senses, and eventually, echolocation. Basilosaurus could not make that transition. It was not outcompeted in battle. It was outpaced by change. By the early Oligocene, archaic whales like Basilosaurus were gone. Their reign ended not in violence, but in silence. The apex predator of the Eocene did not lose its throne to a rival. It lost its world. For decades, Basilosaurus fossils were misunderstood. Before science recognized what they truly were, its massive bones were treated as curiosities. Some were mistaken for serpent remains. Others were used as furniture, fireplace supports, or built directly into homes and foundations. No one realized they belonged to one of the greatest predators the oceans had ever produced. Today, those same bones tell a different story. Basilosaurus is now the state fossil of Alabama and Mississippi, a quiet marker of a vanished world. A reminder that much of what we walk on today once lay beneath warm, shallow seas filled with creatures unlike anything alive now. Where forests grow and cities stand, an ancient whale once ruled. Yet its name remains a mistake. The king lizard was never a lizard at all. It was a whale, an apex predator stretched longer than a school bus, a hunter built for an ocean that no longer exists, a transitional form caught between land and sea, teeth and echolocation, brute strength and future intelligence. Basilosaurus shows us something uncomfortable about Earth's history. The most dangerous creatures do not always look monstrous. Sometimes they look unfamiliar. Sometimes they look unfinished. And sometimes they vanish, not because they were weak, but because the world moved on without them. The ocean remembers, even when we forget. If stories like this interest you, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. It helps keep these deep dives coming. Thank you for watching.